let me open the floor for questions.
Excuse me. Thank you. The British lady made a reference to the Chilcot report. I wonder whether what Blair and Bush did to release terrorism would ever be released. I would like to have her views on that. Whether it's being hushed up now, would it ever be released?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. The report will be published, that is for sure. When is a big debating point. Some people think it might be done by the end of this year through pressure from the Prime Minister. The chairman of the inquiry is rather hesitant for legal reasons. My gut feeling is the report will be somewhat edited, but some people will be very exposed and probably rather unfairly. One of the issues that's come out in the last week is a general was being criticised for decisions he took down in Basra. Well, bearing in mind the military are servants of the politicians, I felt that was rather unfair, but we don't really know the whole picture. But there's no doubt about it. Prime Minister Blair is nervous. I think for closure on the whole story, everybody would like to learn much more about the run-up to the decision to enter Iraq, rather than actually what was happening after we entered into Iraq, because that was pretty clear what was going on. But the decision leading up to it wasn't really clear. But I must say, when I made my visits to Washington in the run-up to that time, I felt very uncomfortable from all the various officials I met about their attitude to the British engagement. I felt they were using us because they needed someone to support their UN resolutions. And I feel that perhaps even in the future, it'll take some time for Prime Minister Blair to reflect. Why did he? I'm not even sure he really knows himself. History sometimes takes quite a while to unravel.
Thank you.
Excuse me, yeah.
Thank you, Lady Olga. The organizers or the rapporteurs tell me that we could take one more question because we are running out of time. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am Major General Shafiqur Rahman from Bangladesh. We have heard the emerging global order, Indian and Pakistan perspective on respective national security issues. Now I'll be on the South Asian perspective. We all know and agree that in South Asia, nations have shared history. More or less we have common culture, common traditions. We also, on most of the global issue, we think and talk similar. But my question is, there are certain national security issues on which we fall apart sometime, and we fall apart very badly. So is there any way forward that we can harmonize our thinking and we can have shared views on certain issues like terrorism, sharing of the common water, rivers, and many other issues? Is there any probability that we think alike and we act alike? So my question is to His Excellency High Commissioner of Pakistan, and also the Speaker from India, Mr. Uttam Sinha. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Pakistan's dictated policy is to resolve all issues through discussion. We'll have to be more magnanimous at our ends, each one of us. It's a different thing to say what we are saying, but at the end also I said we have to be more serious about what we are doing and where we are going. And let's not be contained by the people who are opinion makers alone. Let's assert ourselves what we want. Are we serious about it? If we are serious about it, or are we point scoring against each other? We have done it for 60 years. It's time to move forward and do good for our people. And it must be an honest decision to take and move forward. Otherwise, we can recount the history, it's pointless now. History is history, and we have to move forward. So it's an intellectual decision that the people of the countries have to take. And I think that realization is setting in. I thank you.
Thank you for that question. One of the biggest tragedy we South Asians have is that we underestimate ourselves. We also undervalue ourselves. I think it's time to really reconsider that. Think about effective and meaningful cooperation rather than get caught in old histories and hurts and agonies. I'll give an example, as I did mention a bit in my presentation. I think the very concept of looking at South Asia now beyond the mere politics of it is to conceive it as an ecosystem, where you don't really have borders anymore, but nature becomes your final frontier. South Asian states have shown great maturity, for example, in signing treaties on the rivers. Very few countries in any part of the region have ever done this. So we have this inherent sensibility in dealing with issues, which we think we should now try to capitulate forward on many issues, For example, look at commerce, trade, cultural connect, tourism. These are the way forward, making South Asia far more functional in its nature, rather than be seen as a flashpoint.
Okay, thank you for those comments. And before I conclude, let me just make a few comments on what was presented to you today. I think what we have to realize is countries cannot be in isolation today. In the 21st century, we need to work together. Collective action, integrated action is very important. Of course, the speaker on because the issues and the emerging world order as we see it, I think this session and the previous sessions and the other sessions that would be presented to you this evening and tomorrow, I think we'll be sort of repeating ourselves, because the issues and the national security issues that are being discussed are common to all of us, or to most of us, or most of the issues are common. Maybe there are certain issues which are specific to certain countries, certain regions. But at the same time, there is a necessity to work together, collective action, and also reform. There is a cry for reform in some of the institutions, the structures, and also the mindset, as well as it was stated by some of the speakers. One interesting idea that came out of this discussion is, of course, the West Asian, the speaker who spoke on the West Asian perspective spoke also about resources. In a way, it seems as if we are going back to the 15th century. As we know, with colonization and all the other issues, 15th century was a century where certain countries were looking for resources. And at the same time, even now, that same issue seems to be an issue within countries and also from outside. The other factor which came out is, of course, ultimately it boils down to power. National security issues is linked to power. And the last the person who just asked the last question, I think what we need is political will and leadership to address these issues that we have spoken and discussed today and analyzed today. Because today it's a conference organized by the defense, by the military. I think most of the people in the audience would ask the question, how does the military come into this? I think what one has to realize is the military also needs to think in different terms. It's no longer an era of, to a certain extent, no longer era of conventional wars. Conventional wars will be there, but now the emphasis is on non-conventional conflicts, non-conventional elements that are coming up, and non-conventional threats to national security. So this is an issue that the services, the military also has to think of and reorient maybe your structures and training and sharing expertise, intelligence, coordination, etc. And the need to work closely with the civilian, the governments, the leaders. There is increasing linkages between the military and the civilian thinking. So I would like to leave the audience with some of these thoughts. And let me thank the Army Commander once again, and also the organizers for this, for organizing this seminar, which is, I think, very interesting, and more interesting ideas and an analysis to come. And also, last but not least, the panelists for very interesting presentations made today. Thank you very much.